After the divorce, she fled from him. He begged her with red eyes. Unexpectedly, she was already engaged. Hi, my very beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories family. How are you, my loyal, beautiful, and strong family? May God bless each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart. Today, I want to offer a special prayer. A prayer for my beautiful sisters. For anyone feeling depressed, sad, or carrying tension in life, please listen with your heart. O Lord, lift up the hearts that are heavy. Give peace to the minds battling storms. Replace sadness with hope, fear with courage, and pain with your healing love. Let no one watching this feel alone, because we are a family. We stand together, we pray together, and we rise together. Amen. Now, my beautiful family, tell me, where are you watching from right now? Write it in the comments. I want to know. And if you feel peace, love, or even a smile from this video, please like it. If not, it's okay. You can skip the like. I still love you. Now, let's begin with love. Chapter 1. Shattered Dreams. The rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Chamberlain mansion, each drop racing down the glass like tears. Savannah Rose stood in the center of the vast living room, her slender frame trembling as she faced her husband of 3 years. "You went behind my back," Sebastian Chamberlain hissed, his voice lethally quiet, as he held up the creamy envelope from the Harrington Institute of Fine Arts. His handsome face, once the object of her adoration, was now twisted with rage. "After everything I've given you, this is how you repay me?" Savannah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Sebastian, please, it's just an art program. I wouldn't have to quit working for your company." She reached for him, her dark eyes pleading. "I just want to create again, to paint like I used to before I rescued you from that pathetic life." Sebastian laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. "Living in that run-down apartment, working 2 jobs just to buy canvas and paint?" He stepped closer, towering over her. "Have you forgotten who you were before me, Savannah? A nobody, a charity case." The truth of his words stung more than any physical blow. Savannah had grown up in foster care, bouncing from home to home until she'd aged out of the system at 18. Art had been her only constant, her salvation through years of loneliness. Then she'd met Sebastian at one of her small gallery showings, handsome, wealthy, and seemingly captivated by both her and her talent. "I never asked to stop painting," she whispered, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she tried to stand up to him. "You were the one who said it wasn't befitting of a Chamberlain wife to pursue such an unprofitable hobby." Lightning flashed, illuminating the room and casting Sebastian's face in harsh relief. In that split second, Savannah saw something in his eyes that sent ice through her veins, pure, unfiltered hatred. "3 years," he said, his voice dropping dangerously low. "3 years I've given you everything. Designer clothes, jewelry, a life other women would kill for." He crumpled the acceptance letter in his fist. "And all I asked was for you to be the perfect wife, to stand by my side at events, to manage our home, to eventually give me children." Savannah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the slight swell of her abdomen beneath her silk blouse. The pregnancy test had confirmed her suspicions just yesterday. She'd planned to surprise Sebastian tonight with the news, hoping it might soften him, might bring back the man she thought she'd married. "I love you, Sebastian," she said softly, one hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. "But I can't keep living like this, afraid to speak, to have dreams of my own, to even call my friends without your permission." His eyes narrowed, tracking the movement of her hand. "What are you hiding?" In 2 swift strides he crossed to her, grabbing her wrist. "Are you pregnant?" The hope that had flickered in his eyes died immediately, replaced by something colder. "Whose is it?" he demanded. Savannah recoiled as if slapped. "What? It's yours, Sebastian. How could you even— Don't lie to me!" His voice rose to a roar that competed with the thunder outside. "Is it that art teacher you've been seeing behind my back?" The one who encouraged you to apply to this school? Mr. Davidson is 70 years old. Tears sprang to Savannah's eyes. He was my mentor before we met. There's nothing... The slap came without warning, the force of it sending her stumbling. Backward, Savannah's hand flew to her cheek, shock rendering her momentarily speechless. In 3 years of emotional abuse, of isolation and control, Sebastian had never struck her. "I want a divorce," he said, his voice suddenly calm, detached. Clearly this marriage was a mistake from the beginning. Savannah stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words through the shock. "Sebastian, please, let's talk about this. The baby—" "There is no baby," he interrupted, his face contorting. "At least, not one I'll acknowledge." He crossed to his desk and withdrew a document, sliding it across the marble coffee table toward her. "I had these drawn up weeks ago when I first suspected you were being unfaithful. All it needs is your signature." Savannah looked down at the divorce papers, her vision blurring with tears. "Weeks ago, you've been planning this? Sign it and you can leave with the clothes on your back. Nothing more." His lips curved in a cold smile. "The prenup you signed is ironclad. You get nothing." "I don't want your money," Savannah said, her voice finding strength despite her trembling body. "I never did." Sebastian laughed, the sound cutting through her like glass. "Of course you did. Why else would someone like you marry someone like me?" His words pierced her heart with their cruelty. Despite everything, despite the control that had gradually tightened around her like a noose, Savannah had loved him once. Perhaps part of her still did. The part that remembered his smile on their first date, the tenderness of his touch before the marriage had soured. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows with renewed fury. "I won't sign," she said quietly. "Not tonight. I need time to think, to get legal advice." Sebastian's expression darkened. "Sign it now, or I swear to God, Savannah, you'll regret it." The menace in his voice made her blood run cold. For the first time, Savannah felt genuinely afraid for her physical safety. Her hand went protectively to her stomach again. Sebastian caught the gesture and something in him seemed to snap. With a roar of rage, he swept his arm across the coffee table, sending crystal decanters and glasses shattering across the marble floor. "Get out!" he bellowed, advancing on her. "Get out of my house!" Savannah backed toward the door, her heart racing. "Sebastian, you're not thinking clearly. Please, let's talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. There's nothing to discuss." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh as he dragged her toward the foyer. "This marriage is over. You're nothing to me now." Rain pelted Savannah's face as Sebastian thrust her onto the mansion's front steps. She stumbled, catching herself on the stone balustrade, her thin blouse immediately soaking through. "Sebastian, please," she cried, the rain mixing with her tears. "At least let me get my coat, my purse." "You'll get nothing from me." He threw the divorce papers at her, the sheets instantly drenched by the downpour. "Sign these and have your lawyer contact. Mine. Until then, don't come back here." Lightning illuminated his face one final time, revealing not the man she had fallen in love with, but a stranger whose features were twisted with contempt. The massive door slammed shut, leaving Savannah alone in the storm, trembling with cold and shock. For a moment she simply stood there, unable to process what had just happened. Then, clutching the sodden divorce papers to her chest, she stumbled down the long driveway toward the gate. Her designer heels, never meant for walking, slipped on the wet pavement. Each step sent pain shooting through her ankles, but still she pressed on, driven by a primal need to get away from the mansion that had become her prison. The rain was relentless, soaking through her silk blouse and tailored pants, plastering her dark curls to her forehead and neck. By the time she reached the estate's wrought-iron gates, she was shivering violently, her teeth chattering with cold. The security guard's booth was empty, a small mercy. Using the pedestrian gate, Savannah stumbled out onto the main road, unsure where to go. Her phone, her wallet, everything was still inside the house. She had no way to call for help, no money for a taxi or hotel room. For the first time since she was a child, Savannah was truly alone. She began walking along the deserted road, arms wrapped around herself in a futile attempt to preserve warmth. Each flash of lightning illuminated the luxurious estates that lined either side, gated communities where people like her once husband lived in isolated splendor, far from the realities of ordinary life. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 3 years, she'd lived among them, dressed like them, spoken like them, but had never truly been one of them. Sebastian had made sure of that, constantly reminding her of her humble origins, using her background as a weapon to keep her in line. A particularly violent gust of wind sent her staggering. Exhaustion was setting in, the adrenaline of her confrontation with Sebastian giving way to bone-deep fatigue. The rain hadn't let up, and her wet clothes clung to her body like a second skin, chilling her to the core. "Stay awake," she muttered to herself, one hand instinctively going to her stomach. "You have to stay awake for the baby." But her body had other ideas. The stress of the night, the shock of Sebastian's betrayal, the physical toll of walking in the storm. It was all too much. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision, and her steps became increasingly unsteady. She never felt herself fall. One moment she was walking, putting one painful foot in front of the other, and the next, the world was tilting sideways. The last thing Savannah saw before unconsciousness claimed her was a pair of headlights cutting through the rain, moving swiftly in her direction. Then darkness enveloped her and she knew no more. Chapter 2. Divine Intervention. Lorenzo Castillo drove through the torrential downpour, his windshield wipers barely keeping pace with the relentless rain. The road ahead was a blur of darkness, illuminated only by occasional flashes of lightning and the powerful beams of his headlights. He'd been called away from a charity gala to perform emergency surgery, a heart transplant for a 10-year-old boy. And after 6 grueling hours in the operating theater, exhaustion pulled at his limbs like gravity. But the surgery had been successful. The boy would live, and that knowledge warmed Lorenzo even as the storm raged around him. It was moments like these that reminded him why he'd become a surgeon, to save lives, to make a difference. The accolades, the wealth, the reputation as one of the top cardiac surgeons in the country. Those were just pleasant side effects of doing what he loved. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the winding road that led to his lakeside estate. In that split second of clarity, Lorenzo spotted something on the roadside, a crumpled form that didn't belong among the manicured hedges of this exclusive neighborhood. He slammed on the brakes, his Aston Martin skidding slightly on the wet pavement before coming to a stop. For a moment he sat still, peering through the rain-lashed windshield, wondering if his tired eyes were playing tricks on him. Another flash of lightning confirmed his suspicions. There was definitely something, or someone, lying motionless on the side of the road. Without hesitation, Lorenzo grabbed his umbrella from the passenger seat and stepped out into the storm. The wind immediately tried to wrench the umbrella from his grip, turning it inside out with a violent gust. Abandoning it, Lorenzo sprinted toward the dark shape, rain instantly drenching his expensive suit. "Hello?" he called over the howling wind. "Are you hurt?" As he drew closer, his heart sank. It was a woman, lying face down on the wet gravel, her dark hair plastered to her head, her clothes soaked through. For a terrible moment, Lorenzo feared he was too late, that he was looking at a body rather than a person. Then he saw the faint rise and fall of her back as she breathed. "Thank God," he murmured, kneeling beside her. Gently, he turned her over, cradling her head to protect it from the gravel. The woman's face, illuminated by the headlights of his car, struck him like a physical blow. Even unconscious, even with rain streaming down her features, she was breathtaking. High cheekbones, full lips, long lashes resting against smooth brown skin. Her beauty had a delicate strength to it, like a flower that had weathered a storm, or thin trickle of blood ran from a cut on her forehead, quickly diluted by rainwater. Lorenzo pressed 2 fingers to her neck, finding her pulse, weak but steady. Her skin was alarmingly cold to the touch. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" He shook her gently, but she remained unresponsive. Hypothermia was a real risk in this weather, especially if she'd been out here for any length of time. Decision made, Lorenzo slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her shoulders, lifting her with ease. He was surprised by how light she felt, almost fragile in his arms. As he carried her to his car, her head rolled against his chest, and he found himself instinctively holding her closer, trying to shield her from the rain with his own body. The drive to his estate took less than 5 minutes, but to Lorenzo it felt like an eternity. The woman remained unconscious in the passenger seat, her breathing shallow, her lips tinged with blue. Twice he reached across to check her pulse, reassuring himself that she was still with him. His housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, met him at the door, her usual composure momentarily slipping at the sight of Lorenzo carrying an unconscious woman into the house. "Dr. Castillo, what in heaven's name?" "She needs help, Agnes," Lorenzo said, already striding toward the grand staircase. "Call Dr. Chen if you can reach her, but don't bother with an ambulance in this weather. I'll examine her myself for now." Mrs. Winters, ever efficient, was already reaching for the phone. "Which guest room, sir?" Lorenzo hesitated only for a moment. "The blue room. It's closest to mine in case she needs anything during the night." He carried his mysterious guest up the sweeping staircase, leaving a trail of rainwater in his wake. The woman in his arms stirred slightly, a soft moan escaping her lips, but her eyes remained closed. The blue room, named for its soothing azure, walls and ocean-themed decor, was Lorenzo's favorite guest suite. He nudged the door open with his shoulder and gently laid the woman on the 4-poster bed, immediately checking her pulse and breathing again. Her clothes were drenched, her skin ice-cold. Lorenzo knew he needed to get her warm and dry, but the prospect of undressing an unconscious stranger, a beautiful woman no less, gave him pause. Mrs. Winters appeared at the doorway, arms filled with towels and a first aid kit. "Dr. Chen is on her way, but the roads are flooding. She may be an hour or more." "Thank you, Agnes." Lorenzo took a towel and gently dabbed at the cut on the woman's forehead. "I need to get her out of these wet clothes and warm her up. Can you help me?" Together, they carefully removed the woman's sodden silk blouse and tailored pants, replacing them with a soft flannel nightgown from Mrs. Winters' own closet. Lorenzo, ever the professional, kept his eyes averted as much as possible, focusing instead on the medical necessity of the situation. Still, he couldn't help but notice the slight swelling of her abdomen. A pregnancy, perhaps? The possibility made his concern for her even more acute. Once she was dressed in dry clothes, Lorenzo checked her vital signs again. Her pulse was still weak, her breathing shallow. Her body temperature was dangerously low. Classic signs of moderate hypothermia. "I'll need more blankets, Agnes, and hot water bottles if we have them." He gently lifted the woman's eyelids, checking her pupils with the penlight from the first aid kit. "Equal and reactive. That's good." Mrs. Winters returned with an armload of blankets and 2 hot water bottles. Together, they cocooned the unconscious woman in layers of warmth, placing the hot water bottles strategically at her feet and core. "Should we call the police, sir?" Mrs. Winters asked, her voice hushed as if afraid of waking their patient. "She might be reported missing." Lorenzo hesitated. The woman wore no wedding ring, carried no identification that they could find. Her clothes, though soaked, were clearly expensive, designer brands that spoke of wealth. What had she been doing alone on that road, in the middle of a storm? Let's wait until she wakes up, he decided. She may have a perfectly reasonable explanation. After Mrs. Winters left to prepare some soup for when their guest awakened, Lorenzo pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, his medical training warring with his exhaustion. He should sleep. He'd been awake for nearly 36 hours, but he couldn't bring himself to leave her, not when her condition could deteriorate without warning. So he sat in the dimly lit room, listening to the storm rage outside and the soft, increasingly steady breathing of the woman in the bed. Occasionally, he reached out to check her pulse or adjust the blankets, his touch gentle, clinical, yet there was something about her that called to him on a level beyond his medical concern. Perhaps it was the vulnerability in her unconscious face, or the mystery of finding her alone in the storm. Whatever it was, Lorenzo felt drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain, a sensation both foreign and strangely familiar, like remembering a dream he'd never had. Hours passed. The storm gradually subsided, rain giving way to a gentle patter against the windows. Dr. Chen called to say the roads were now impassable. She wouldn't be able to make it until morning. Lorenzo assured her that their patient was stable, her body temperature slowly rising to safer levels. It was nearly dawn when the woman stirred. Lorenzo, who had been dozing in the chair, immediately came alert, leaning forward as her eyelids fluttered. "Hello?" he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises the color of rich amber flecked with gold. For a moment, she simply stared at the ceiling, confusion evident in her gaze. Then her eyes found his, and Lorenzo felt something shift in the air between them, a connection forming, inexplicable but undeniable. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" "My name is Lorenzo Castillo. I'm a doctor." He kept his voice calm, reassuring. "I found you unconscious by the road during the storm. You're in my home now, safe." Fear flickered across her features, quickly replaced by wariness. She tried to sit up, wincing as she did so. "Easy," Lorenzo said, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've been through quite an ordeal, hypothermia, a minor concussion from your fall. You need to rest." She sank back against the pillows, but her eyes remained alert, wary. "Why did you bring me to your home? Why not a hospital?" The storm made travel difficult, and as a cardiac surgeon, I was equipped to handle your immediate care. He offered a small smile. "I promise you're safe here, Miss—" She hesitated, as if debating whether to give her name. "Savannah," she finally said. "Savannah Rose." "A beautiful name," Lorenzo said, the words escaping before he could consider their appropriateness. A faint blush colored Savannah's cheeks, and she looked away. "Thank you," she murmured, "for helping me." Of course. Lorenzo stood, suddenly aware of how intimate the situation might appear, him sitting at her bedside through the night. "Are you hungry? My housekeeper prepared some soup, and you should try to eat something if you can." Savannah nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "That would be nice." As Lorenzo turned to leave, her voice stopped him at the door. "Dr. Castillo?" He looked back to find those amber eyes fixed on him, filled with a vulnerability that made his heart constrict. "Yes? How long can I stay?" The question was asked, so quietly he almost missed it. I don't have anywhere else to go right now." The admission clearly cost her, pride warring with necessity in her expression. Lorenzo felt an inexplicable surge of protectiveness toward this woman he'd just met. "As long as you need, Savannah," he said gently. "As long as you need." Something passed between them in that moment, a current of understanding, of connection, that transcended their brief acquaintance. Savannah's eyes widened slightly, as if she felt it too. Then she nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that somehow felt more significant than words could express. Lorenzo closed the door softly behind him, his heart beating in a rhythm that felt newly syncopated, as if its usual steady pattern had been subtly altered by the woman now resting in his guest room. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, Lorenzo Castillo felt as though he'd been waiting his entire life. For a moment he hadn't known was coming, a moment that had arrived in the form of a woman found in a storm, a woman with amber eyes and a name like a promise, Savannah Rose. Chapter 3. Healing Wounds. Morning sunlight streamed through the wide windows of the blue room, casting golden rectangles across the plush carpet. Savannah sat propped against a mountain of pillows, a breakfast tray balanced on her lap. The food was exquisite: fluffy scrambled eggs, perfectly crisped bacon, fresh berries with cream. But she merely picked at it, her mind too full of worries to focus on eating. 3 days had passed since Lorenzo Castillo had found her on that rain-soaked road. 3 days of being cared for in this beautiful lakeside mansion, with its soaring ceilings and spectacular views. 3 days of recovering her physical strength, while her mind remained in turmoil. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. "Come in," she called, setting aside her barely touched breakfast. Lorenzo entered, immaculate in charcoal slacks and a navy button-down that accentuated his broad shoulders. His dark hair was still damp from his shower, and the subtle scent of his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, drifted across the room. "Good morning," he said, his smile warm. "How are you feeling today?" Savannah offered a small smile in return. "Better. Thank you." It wasn't a lie. The dizziness had subsided, and the cut on her forehead was healing nicely. Physically, she was recovering well. Emotionally was another matter entirely. Lorenzo crossed to the windows, drawing back the curtains further to reveal the sparkling lake beyond. "It's beautiful out there today. Perhaps if you're up to it, we could take a walk on the grounds. Fresh air might do you good." Savannah hesitated. Part of her wanted to stay hidden in this safe, beautiful room forever, protected from the realities waiting beyond Lorenzo's estate. But another part, the stronger part that had survived Foster, Care and Sebastian's abuse, knew she couldn't hide forever. "I'd like that," she said softly. Lorenzo's smile widened, creating small crinkles at the corners of his eyes that Savannah found unexpectedly charming. "Excellent. Mrs. Winters put some clothes in the dresser for you. Nothing fancy, just some things her daughter left behind when she went to college. They should fit well enough for now." After he left, Savannah showered and dressed in the borrowed clothes, soft jeans and a simple blue sweater that was slightly too large but wonderfully comfortable. She twisted her damp curls into a loose bun, then studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman who looked back at her seemed both familiar and strange. Same amber eyes, same full lips and high cheekbones. But there was something different in her expression, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before, or perhaps had been there all along but hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed defenses. Downstairs, Lorenzo waited in the grand foyer, idly checking messages on his phone. He looked up as she descended the staircase, and something flickered in his eyes. Admiration, perhaps, or simple recognition of her improvement. "You look well," he said, offering his arm with old-fashioned gallantry. "Shall we?" The grounds of Lorenzo's estate were even more impressive in daylight than they had appeared from her window. Meticulously landscaped gardens gave way to wilder, woodland paths, all sloping gently down toward the lake that shimmered like polished silver in the morning sun. They walked in companionable silence for a while, following a stone path that wound between flowering shrubs and ancient oak trees. Savannah breathed deeply, savoring the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. After 3 years of living in Sebastian's sterile, modern mansion, where even the gardens were designed for show rather than enjoyment, the natural beauty of Lorenzo's estate felt like a balm to her soul. "Your home is beautiful," she said, eventually breaking the silence. Lorenzo nodded, his expression contemplative. "It belonged to my grandparents. I spent every summer here as a child, running wild with my cousins." A smile touched his lips. "My grandfather was a surgeon too, the first in our family. He bought this place as a retreat from the pressures of hospital life." "Is that why you became a surgeon, following in his footsteps?" "Partly," Lorenzo admitted, "but mostly because of my sister, Sophia." His voice softened at the name. "She was born with a congenital heart defect. I was 10 when she had her first open-heart surgery, old enough to understand how close we came to losing her." He paused, lost in memory. "Seeing how the surgeons saved her life, it changed something in me. I knew then what I wanted to do with my life." Savannah felt a rush of warmth toward him. "And your sister, is she well now?" "She's thriving. Married with twins, living in Barcelona." Pride colored his voice. "She runs a foundation for children with heart conditions." They reached a wooden bench overlooking the lake, and Lorenzo gestured for her to sit. For a moment they simply enjoyed the view, the water rippling in the breeze, birds calling from the trees behind them. "Savannah," Lorenzo began, his tone gentle but direct. "I don't want to press you, but it's been 3 days. You've had no identification, no phone. You haven't asked to contact anyone." He turned to face her, his dark eyes serious. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" The question hung between them, unavoidable. Savannah stared out at the lake, weighing her response. This man had saved her life, had shown her nothing but kindness. He deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as she could bear to share. "I was married," she said finally, the words emerging slowly, painfully. 3 years. It wasn't a good marriage." Lorenzo remained silent, giving her space to continue. "My husband, Sebastian, he was controlling, possessive." Savannah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the day. "At first it was subtle. He'd check my phone, question me about friends or co-workers. He said it was because he loved me so much, couldn't bear the thought of losing me." She glanced at Lorenzo, half expecting to see judgment in his expression. Instead, she found only compassion, and it gave her the courage to continue. "Eventually, he isolated me completely. No friends, no career of my own, just his wife, his possession." Her voice caught on the last word. "The night you found me, we'd had a fight. He discovered I'd applied to art school without telling him. He was angry." "Did he hurt you?" Lorenzo's voice was quiet, but she didn't miss the tension beneath the words. Savannah touched her cheek unconsciously, remembering the sting of Sebastian's slap. He'd never hit me before that night, but the emotional abuse had been going on for years. She swallowed hard. "He divorced me, threw me out in the rain with nothing, no phone, no money, said I could have the clothes on my back and nothing more." Lorenzo's hands clenched into fists, then deliberately relaxed. "And the pregnancy?" Savannah's head jerked up, eyes wide. "How did you—" "I'm a doctor," he reminded her gently. "And I had to examine you when you were unconscious, to make sure you weren't seriously injured." A flush crept up Savannah's cheeks. "I only found out the day before," she explained, her hand resting protectively on her abdomen. "According to the home test, I'm probably about 6 weeks along. I haven't even seen a doctor to confirm it properly." Her voice softened. "I was going to tell Sebastian that night. I thought maybe it would change things between us, make him happy. Instead, he accused me of cheating, said the baby wasn't his. The memory still had the power to wound her deeply. Then he threw me out." Lorenzo was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, but Savannah could hear the anger simmering beneath it. "What your husband did was cruel and potentially criminal," he said. Abandoning a pregnant woman in a storm, with no means to call for help? He shook his head. You could have died out there. Ex-husband, Savannah corrected quietly. He made that very clear. Something in her tone must have conveyed the depths of her hurt, because Lorenzo's expression softened immediately. Hesitantly, he reached out, taking her hand in his much larger one. I'm sorry, Savannah, he said. No one deserves to be treated that way. The simple touch, the genuine compassion in his voice, it was her undoing. Tears that she had been holding back for days suddenly spilled over, streaming down her cheeks in silent rivers of grief. Not just for the marriage that had ended so brutally, but for the years of isolation and control, for the young woman with dreams who had slowly disappeared beneath Sebastian's domination. Lorenzo didn't try to stop her tears or offer empty platitudes. He simply held her hand, a steady presence as she finally allowed herself to grieve. When the storm of emotions began to subside, Lorenzo produced a handkerchief from his pocket, an actual cloth handkerchief monogrammed with his initials. The old-fashioned gesture made Savannah smile through her tears. I must look a mess, she said, dabbing at her eyes. You look beautiful, Lorenzo replied, the words escaping as if against his will. He immediately looked away, seemingly embarrassed. By his own candor, forgive me, that was inappropriate. It was kind, Savannah corrected softly. Thank you. A slightly awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the lake shore. Savannah studied Lorenzo's profile, struck again by the contrast between him and Sebastian. Where her ex-husband had been all sharp, angles and cold precision, Lorenzo was warmth and quiet strength. What about you? She asked, eager to shift the focus away from her own painful story. You know all about my disastrous marriage, but I know almost nothing about you, except that you're a heart surgeon with a lake house. Lorenzo's smile returned, warming his dark eyes. Not much to tell, I'm afraid. Work keeps me busy. I'm chief of cardiac surgery at Metropolitan Hospital, the youngest in the hospital's history, a fact my mother never tires of mentioning to her friends. No wife? Girlfriend? The question slipped out before Savannah could censure herself. I'm sorry, that's none of my business. No, it's all right. Lorenzo leaned back on the bench, his posture relaxing. I was engaged once, about 5 years ago. Elena was a pediatric surgeon, brilliant, dedicated. We met during my residency. Something in his tone told Savannah this story didn't have a happy ending. What happened? She received an offer to join Doctors Without Borders, a 2-year commitment. In Sudan, a shadow passed over his face. I couldn't leave my practice here, not when I'd just been appointed to lead the pediatric cardiac unit. We tried long distance for 6 months, but... He shrugged, the gesture eloquent in its simplicity. Some relationships aren't meant to survive separation. I'm sorry, Savannah said softly. Lorenzo turned to her, his smile tinged with old sadness. It was for the best. Elena was meant to be out there in the world, saving lives in places that desperately need doctors. And I was meant to be here. His gaze held hers. Perhaps everything happens for a reason. The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Savannah looked away first, her heart beating a little faster than normal. I should go back to the house, she said, rising from the bench. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. I need to figure out what to do next. Lorenzo stood as well, concern etching lines across his forehead. And you're welcome to stay as long as you need, Savannah. There's no rush. That's very generous, but... She trailed off, uncertain how to explain the conflicting emotions within her. She felt safe with Lorenzo, safer than she had in years. But she also felt something else, a dangerous attraction, a pull toward this kind, handsome man who had rescued her like some modern-day knight. And after Sebastian, after 3 years of emotional manipulation and control, the last thing Savannah needed was to leap from one relationship to another. As if reading her thoughts, Lorenzo kept a respectful distance as they walked back toward the house. "At least stay until you've seen an obstetrician," he said. "I can arrange an appointment with a colleague, discreetly if you prefer, and I have a friend who's an excellent divorce attorney if you need legal advice." Savannah nodded, touched by his practical concern. "Thank you. That would be helpful." They reached the house and paused on the wide veranda, framed by climbing roses that filled the air with sweet perfume. Lorenzo turned to her, his expression serious. "Savannah, I want you to know something," he said, his voice low and intense. "What happened with your husband? It wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault." The words struck a chord deep within, touching a wound she hadn't even realized was still raw and bleeding. For years, Sebastian had made her believe that his anger, his control, his emotional abuse were all reactions to her failures as a wife. That if only she were better, more perfect, more compliant, he wouldn't need to hurt her. Tears welled in, her eyes again, but this time Savannah didn't try to hide them. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. "I'm not sure I believe it yet, but thank you." Lorenzo's gaze dropped to her lips for the briefest of moments, then back to her eyes. Something electric passed between them, a current of attraction neither could deny, but neither was ready to act upon. "I have to go to the hospital," he said eventually, breaking the spell. "Emergency surgery, but Mrs. Winters will be here if you need anything." He hesitated, then added, "Will you still be here when I get back?" The question was casual, but Savannah heard the real concern beneath it. Fear that she might disappear, return to Sebastian, or simply vanish from Lorenzo's life as suddenly as she had entered it. "Yes," she said softly. "I'll be here." Relief flashed across his features, followed quickly by a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Good, I'll see you tonight then." As Lorenzo drove away, Savannah remained on the veranda, watching until his car disappeared from view. For the first time in days, perhaps for the first time in years, she felt a fragile sense of hope unfurling within her. She placed a hand on her stomach, thinking of the tiny life growing there, and made a silent promise. Whatever happened next, she would not return to Sebastian. She would not allow her child to grow up in a home filled with fear and control as she had once done. The future stretched before her, uncertain but full of possibility. And for now, in this beautiful house by the lake, Savannah had found a safe harbor in which to heal and perhaps eventually to hope again. Chapter 4. New Beginnings. 2 weeks had passed since that fateful night in the storm. Savannah stood at the window of Lorenzo's study, watching golden autumn leaves drift from the trees surrounding the lake. Her doctor's appointment that morning had confirmed what she already knew. She was now 8 weeks pregnant, the baby developing normally despite the trauma she'd endured. Dr. Reeves, the discreet obstetrician Lorenzo had recommended, had even shown her the tiny, flickering heartbeat on the ultrasound screen. The news had filled her with a complicated mixture of joy and apprehension. A baby, her baby, a new life growing inside her even as her old life had crumbled around her. Everything. "All right?" Lorenzo's voice came from the doorway, gentle with concern. Savannah turned, offering him a smile that felt more genuine than any she'd managed in years. "Yes, just thinking." He crossed to his desk, setting down a leather portfolio. "About the apartment." Earlier that week, Lorenzo had mentioned a friend who owned a building in the city, a modest but charming apartment that was currently vacant. He'd shown her photos, and Savannah had immediately fallen in love with the space, with its hardwood floors and large windows overlooking a tree-lined street. "It's perfect," she said, moving away from the window, "but I can't accept it, Lorenzo, not when I have no way to pay rent." The first month is covered, he reminded her. That gives you time to find work. Savannah turned to him, a familiar anxiety tightening her chest. That's what Sebastian used to say, that I shouldn't worry about money, that he'd take care of everything. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to continue. It became another way he controlled me. I had no income of my own, no financial independence. Lorenzo's expression softened with understanding. You're right to be concerned, he said, surprising her. Financial independence is important, especially after what you've been through. He came around the desk, keeping a respectful distance. What if you paid rent when you're able? The apartment. We'll be there regardless. My friend uses it mainly as an investment property. You can move in when you're ready, pay what you can when you can, and I promise— His eyes held hers, sincere and unwavering. There will never be strings attached. Savannah studied him, searching for any hint of manipulation or hidden agenda. Finding none, she felt something tight inside her chest begin to loosen. I used to paint portraits, she said finally. Before Sebastian, I was quite good, had a waiting list of clients at one point. Lorenzo's face brightened. That's perfect. You could start building a client base again. It would take time, she cautioned. You have time, he assured her, and talent. I've seen the sketches you've been working on since you've been here. Savannah blinked in surprise. You have? Mrs. Winters might have mentioned them, Lorenzo admitted with a smile. She was quite impressed. The generosity of this man continued to amaze her. In the 2 weeks she'd stayed at his home, Lorenzo had never made her feel like a burden or a charity case. Instead, he'd offered practical help, arranging her medical appointments, introducing her to his attorney friend Sarah, who was now handling her divorce, and now helping her find a place to live. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. Lorenzo looked up from the papers on his desk, his dark eyes warm. Seeing you recover, watching you become stronger each day, that's thanks enough. A comfortable silence fell between them. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd developed an easy companionship, sharing meals when Lorenzo wasn't at the hospital, talking late into the evening about everything and nothing. Savannah had learned that Lorenzo loved classical music and old movies, that he spoke 4 languages fluently, that he volunteered at a camp for children with heart conditions every summer, and Lorenzo had learned about her childhood in foster care after her mother's death, her scholarship to art school, which she'd abandoned when she met Sebastian, her dreams of someday exhibiting her paintings in a real gallery. I was thinking, Lorenzo said, breaking the silence. The apartment has a small spare room with excellent natural light. It would make a perfect studio. Savannah felt her heart quicken. A studio? For your painting. He reached into a drawer and withdrew a wrapped package. Which reminds me, I have something for you. Curious, Savannah accepted the gift, carefully removing the simple brown paper. Inside was a wooden box, beautifully crafted of polished cherry wood. She opened it to find rows of oil paints nestled in velvet compartments, along with brushes of various sizes, all of professional quality. Lorenzo, she breathed, running her fingers over the supplies. This is too much. Not at all. He smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. Consider it a housewarming gift. Tears pricked at Savannah's eyes. How long had it been since someone had encouraged her dreams rather than dismissed them? Sebastian had called her art a hobby, had systematically removed it from her life until painting, once her greatest joy, had become a distant memory. Without thinking, Savannah stepped forward and pressed a kiss to Lorenzo's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, her lips lingering near his skin. When she pulled back, Lorenzo's eyes had darkened, his breathing slightly uneven. For a charged moment, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Smell the subtle notes of his cologne. Then Lorenzo stepped back, clearing his throat. "You're welcome," he said, his voice a touch huskier than normal. Savannah turned away, her heart racing. What was she doing? She was still technically married, still pregnant with another man's child, still healing from years of emotional abuse. The last thing she needed was to complicate her life with new feelings, especially for the man who had become her most steadfast friend and support. But despite her rational thoughts, Savannah couldn't deny the attraction that had been building. Between them, the way her pulse quickened when Lorenzo entered a room, the way his smile could make her forget momentarily all the broken pieces of her life that she was trying to reassemble. "The movers will come tomorrow," Lorenzo said, his voice returning to its normal timbre. "Is there anything else you need for the apartment?" Savannah shook her head. Already, Lorenzo and Mrs. Winters had helped her assemble the essentials: bed, linens, kitchenware, a few changes of clothes. Sarah, the attorney, had managed to retrieve some of Savannah's personal items from Sebastian's house: photographs, jewelry that had belonged to her mother, a few keepsakes that held sentimental value. "You've done more than enough," she assured him, "more than I could ever repay." Lorenzo's expression grew serious. "Savannah, you don't owe me anything. I hope you know that." Did she? After years with Sebastian, where every gift, every kindness came with strings attached, it was hard to believe that Lorenzo expected nothing in return for his generosity. Yet as she studied his face, the openness of his expression, the sincerity in his eyes, Savannah felt something inside her relax, a tension she hadn't even realized she was carrying. "I know," she said softly, and for the first time, she truly did. The next day dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for moving. Savannah stood in the foyer of Lorenzo's mansion, her meager possessions packed into 2 suitcases. Mrs. Winters had tearfully pressed a container of homemade soup into her hands, along with a promise to visit the new apartment soon. All set? Lorenzo appeared from his study, car keys in hand. Savannah nodded, surprised by the sudden tightness in her throat. She had been looking forward to having her own space, to beginning the process of rebuilding her life. But now, faced with leaving the safety of Lorenzo's home, she felt an unexpected wave of anxiety. As if sensing her unease, Lorenzo took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'm only a phone call away," he reminded her, "and I'll check in tonight, after my shift ends." The drive to the city passed quickly, filled with comfortable conversation. Lorenzo pointed out landmarks along the way: his favorite bookstore, a cafe with the best croissants in the city, the hospital where he worked. The apartment building was in a charming neighborhood of tree-lined streets and brownstone buildings. Lorenzo led her up to the 3rd floor, unlocking the door with a flourish. "Welcome home," he said, stepping aside to let her enter first. Savannah gasped. The photos hadn't done the space justice. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating hardwood floors and bright white walls. The furniture was simple but elegant: a comfortable sofa in soft grey, a dining table with 4 chairs, a bookshelf already stocked with a few volumes, and everywhere there were flowers, vases of fresh lilies and roses on every surface, filling the apartment with their fragrance. "Do you like it?" Lorenzo asked, watching her reaction with barely concealed eagerness. "It's beautiful," Savannah breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "But the furniture, these weren't in the photos." "I may have taken a few liberties," Lorenzo admitted. "The place was unfurnished, and you mentioned needing to start from scratch." Savannah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After years of having her preferences ignored or belittled by Sebastian, the thoughtfulness of Lorenzo's gesture was overwhelming. He'd remembered her favorite colors, had chosen pieces that perfectly matched her taste. Simple, elegant, nothing ostentatious. "There's more," Lorenzo said, leading her down a short hallway. He opened a door to reveal a small room, flooded with northern light. An easel stood in the center, a blank canvas already mounted on it. A table held neatly arranged paints and brushes, and a comfortable chair sat in one corner beside a small bookshelf filled with art books. "Your studio," Lorenzo said softly. A place to create again. Savannah stood speechless, tears filling her eyes. For 3 years, Sebastian had systematically stripped away every aspect of her identity, her art, her friendships, her independence. And here was Lorenzo, barely knowing her for a month, already helping her reclaim the parts of herself that had been lost. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, turning to him. Lorenzo's gaze was warm, his smile tender. "Say you'll paint again. Say you'll use this space to rediscover your passion." "I will," Savannah promised, meaning it with every fiber of her being. They stood close, the silence between them charged with unspoken feelings. Lorenzo reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Savannah," he began, his voice low and intense. Whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by the buzz of his phone. Lorenzo stepped back, checking the screen with a frown. "The hospital," he explained, regret clear in his expression. "Emergency surgery. I have to go." Savannah nodded, both disappointed and relieved by the interruption. Whatever was building between them, and something definitely was, it needed time. She needed time. "Go," she said gently. "Save lives. That's what you do." Lorenzo hesitated. At the door, "Will you be all right here alone?" The question touched her. Sebastian had never concerned himself with her feelings about being left alone. In fact, he'd seemed to prefer her isolated dependence solely on him for company and emotional support. "I'll be fine," she assured Lorenzo. "I have a lot to do, unpack, explore the neighborhood, maybe even start a painting." His smile returned, brightening his features. "I'll call you later," he promised. After Lorenzo left, Savannah wandered through the apartment, still marveling at the thoughtfulness of his gesture. Every detail had been considered, from the well-stocked refrigerator to the soft throw blankets on the sofa. In the bathroom, she found her favorite shampoo and lotion, small comforts that made the strange apartment feel immediately more like home. How had he known? Had she mentioned these things in passing during their long conversations by the lake? Sebastian had never noticed such details, despite living with her for 3 years. But Lorenzo, in just a few weeks, had paid attention to the small things that brought her joy. In the bedroom, simply furnished with a queen-sized bed and dresser, Savannah found a small box on the nightstand. Inside was a cell phone, already activated with a note in Lorenzo's elegant handwriting, "For emergencies or just to talk. My number is programmed in." The phone represented more than just a means of communication. It was independence, security, a connection to the world that Sebastian had systematically denied her. Savannah sat on the edge of the bed, the phone clutched in her hand, and for the first time in years allowed herself to hope. Hope for a future free from control and fear. Hope for her child growing safely inside her, and perhaps, though she hardly dared admit it even to herself, hope for a new kind of love, one based on respect and kindness rather than possession and power. Outside her window, the city hummed with life and possibility. Inside her new apartment, surrounded by thoughtful gifts from a man who seemed to understand her needs without being asked, Savannah Rose felt the first fragile stirrings of a new beginning. Chapter 5. Shadows of the past, a month in her new apartment, and Savannah felt like a different woman. The bruises from her past, both physical and emotional, were beginning to fade. Her pregnancy was progressing well, the first trimester, nearly complete, and her art, long suppressed under Sebastian's controlling influence, was flourishing once again. The canvas before her depicted a storm-tossed landscape, gradually giving way to sunlight, a metaphor for her own journey that wasn't lost on her. Savannah added a touch of golden light to the horizon, humming softly as she worked. The buzzing of her intercom startled her from her creative trance. Wiping her paint-stained hands on a cloth, she crossed to the door. "Yes," she called through the speaker. "Delivery for Ms. Rose," came the reply. Savannah hesitated. She wasn't expecting anything, and few people knew her new address. Still, Lorenzo often sent small surprises, books he thought she'd enjoy, fresh. Flowers for her studio, specialty teas to soothe her occasional morning sickness. "I'll be right down," she said, grabbing her keys. In the building's lobby stood a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of red roses, at least 3 dozen, arranged in an ornate crystal vase. The flowers were beautiful, but ostentatious. Nothing like the simple, thoughtful arrangements Lorenzo usually sent. "Savannah Rose?" the man confirmed, consulting his clipboard. "That's me," she replied, unease creeping up her spine. "Sign here, please." As Savannah carried the heavy vase up to her apartment, a sense of foreboding grew within her. Inside, she set the flowers on her kitchen counter and found the card nestled among the blooms. The moment she saw the handwriting, her blood ran cold. "I know where you are. We need to talk. I've changed." Sebastian. How had he found her? The apartment was leased under Lorenzo's friend's name, not hers. She'd been careful not to establish any public records at this address, on Sarah's advice. Savannah's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Lorenzo answered on the second ring. "Savannah? Everything all right?" His warm voice immediately calmed her racing heart. "Sebastian found me," she said without preamble. "He sent flowers to the apartment." A brief silence. Then, "I'm coming over. Don't go anywhere. Don't open the door for anyone. Lorenzo, your surgeries can wait. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Lorenzo arrived in record time, concern etched on his handsome features. The moment Savannah opened the door, he pulled her into an embrace that felt like sanctuary. "Are you all right?" he murmured against her hair. "I am now," she admitted, drawing strength from his solid presence. In the kitchen, Lorenzo examined the flowers and card, his expression darkening. "You've heard nothing else from him? No calls or visits?" Savannah shook her head. "Just this. But it's enough. Lorenzo, he knows where I live. We'll change the locks today," Lorenzo said decisively. "And I'll speak with the building manager about security." The efficiency of his response, without a hint of dismissal or minimization, made Savannah's eyes fill with tears. How different from Sebastian, who had always treated her concerns as hysterical overreactions. "Thank you," she whispered. Lorenzo took her hands in his dark eyes serious. "Savannah, you don't need to thank me. Your safety, yours and the baby's, is what matters." That night, after Lorenzo had arranged for new locks and spoken with security, they sat together on Savannah's sofa, takeout containers from her favorite Thai restaurant scattered on the coffee table. Despite the shadow Sebastian's message had cast, Savannah found herself relaxing in Lorenzo's company, even laughing at his stories about hospital mishaps. "I should head home," Lorenzo said eventually, checking his watch. "Early surgery tomorrow." But neither made a move to end the evening. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering gently against the windows, a soothing rhythm rather than the violent storm that had brought them together. "Stay," Savannah said softly. "It's late and it's raining. The guest room is made up." Lorenzo's gaze held hers, searching for something in her expression. Whatever he found there must have reassured him, because he nodded. "If you're sure." "I'm sure." Later, as Savannah prepared for bed, she heard Lorenzo's voice through the wall, a quiet, intense conversation on his phone. Curious, she moved closer to her bedroom door. "I don't care who you have to call," she heard him say. "I want to know how he found her address." "Yes, I understand attorney-client privilege, but someone in your office must have—" A pause, then, "Sarah, she's finally starting to feel safe. If he shows up here—" Another pause. "Tomorrow, then. Thank you." The concern in Lorenzo's voice, the protective edge to his words, sent a warm current through Savannah's body. For years under Sebastian's control, she had felt utterly alone, responsible for managing his moods and bearing the brunt of his displeasure. But now, for the first time, someone was standing firmly in her corner, fighting battles alongside her rather than against her. That night, as Savannah lay awake in bed, troubled by Sebastian's unexpected intrusion into her new life, she reflected on the man sleeping in her guest room. There had been something different in Sebastian's message, beneath the apparent goodwill, a desperation she'd never heard before. In their marriage, Sebastian had always been calculating, controlled. This raw emotion was new and in some ways more frightening. It suggested he was unraveling, and Savannah couldn't predict what he might do next. Morning brought sunshine and the promised visit from Sarah, Lorenzo's friend, and Savannah's divorce attorney. The elegant lawyer examined the flowers and card. With a frown, "I can assure you, this didn't come from my office," she said firmly. "We never disclosed your address to Sebastian or his counsel." "Then how did he find me?" Savannah asked, cradling a mug of herbal tea, another of Lorenzo's thoughtful gestures for her pregnancy. Sarah's expression was grim. "I hate to say it, but he may have hired someone. A private investigator." "Is that legal?" Lorenzo demanded, pacing the small living room. "Unfortunately, yes. There's no restraining order in place, and technically they're still married." Sarah turned to Savannah. "Which brings me to the other reason for my visit. I've expedited the divorce filing, but Sebastian is contesting it." Savannah felt the blood drain from her face. "On what grounds?" "He's claiming emotional distress, abandonment." Sarah's tone made it clear what she thought of these allegations. "And he's demanding reconciliation counseling before proceeding." "That's absurd," Lorenzo interjected. "After what he did to her?" Sarah nodded. "It's a delay tactic, nothing more. But it means the divorce won't be as quick as we'd hoped." After Sarah left, Savannah stood at her studio window, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. Lorenzo joined her, his presence a comfort without words. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. "That I should have expected this," she replied. "Sebastian never lets go of what he considers his." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "You're not his. You never were." The conviction in his voice drew Savannah's gaze to his face. In the month since they'd met, something had shifted between them, friendship deepening into something more profound, more complex. "Lorenzo," she began, uncertain how to express the tumult of emotions within her. He seemed to understand, his eyes softening as they held hers. "I know," he said simply. "It's complicated. You're still married, technically. You're pregnant with his child. You're healing from years of his control. But," she prompted, sensing more, "but I care about you, Savannah. More than I should, perhaps. More than I intended to." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Savannah felt her heart race, fear and hope warring within her. "I care about you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." Lorenzo's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Why?" "Because what if I'm just repeating patterns? What if I'm so broken by Sebastian that I can't recognize—" "You're not broken," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice fierce. "Wounded, yes. Healing, yes. But not broken." Tears filled Savannah's eyes at the absolute certainty in his tone. He believed in her strength more than she did herself. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Lorenzo's gaze dropped to her lips, and Savannah felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by an invisible current. Their first kiss was gentle, a tentative exploration. Lorenzo's lips were warm against hers, his touch reverent, as if she were something precious. When they parted, his eyes remained closed for a moment, as if memorizing the sensation. "I should apologize," he said softly, "but I can't bring myself to regret that." Savannah touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "No apologies," she whispered. "Not for something that feels so right." The blaring of her cell phone shattered the moment. Savannah reached for it automatically, not recognizing the number on the screen. "Hello?" "Savannah." Sebastian's voice, cold and familiar, sent ice through her veins. "Did you like the flowers?" Lorenzo saw the change in her expression immediately. "Is it him?" he mouthed, reaching for the phone. Savannah nodded, putting the call on speaker. "What do you want, Sebastian?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "What do you want, Sebastian?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "My wife back," he replied simply. "This game has gone on long enough, don't you think? It's time to come home." "I am home," Savannah said, "and I'm not your wife anymore." "Not really?" Sebastian's laugh was chilling in its lack of warmth. "The divorce isn't final, sweetheart, and it won't be, not if I have anything to say about it." "Stop calling me," Savannah said, her voice gaining strength. "Stop sending flowers. Stop trying to control me. I know about the baby, Savannah." Sebastian's voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. "My baby. Do you really think I'll let another man raise my child?" The threat was implicit, but clear. Lorenzo reached for the phone, his expression thunderous. "Listen carefully," he said, his normally gentle voice hard as steel. "This is Dr. Lorenzo Castillo. You will not contact Savannah again. You will not send gifts. You will not threaten her or the baby. And who exactly are you?" Sebastian's voice dripped with disdain. "The latest charity case for the good doctor. Did Savannah tell you about her habit of attaching herself to wealthy men?" "I know everything I need to know," Lorenzo replied evenly, "including what kind of man abandons his pregnant wife in a storm." A dangerous silence filled the line. Then Sebastian spoke again, his voice controlled, but with an edge of rage. "This isn't over. Tell Savannah I'll see her soon." The line went dead. Savannah stared at the phone in her hand, trembling slightly. Lorenzo immediately pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "He won't get near you," he promised. "I won't let him." But as Savannah leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his steady presence, she couldn't shake the chill of foreboding. Sebastian Chamberlain was a powerful man, accustomed to getting what he wanted. And right now, what he wanted was her. The shadows of her past, which had begun to recede in the light of her new beginning, suddenly seemed darker and more threatening than ever. Chapter 6. Falling deeply in. The weeks following Sebastian's threatening call, Savannah's life fell into a new rhythm. By day, she painted in her sun-drenched studio, creating vibrant canvases that seemed to come alive beneath her brush. By evening, Lorenzo would arrive after his hospital shifts, sometimes bearing takeout from her favorite restaurants, other times cooking elaborate meals in her small kitchen while she watched, fascinated by his effortless grace. A week after meeting, Savannah gathered her courage and called Mr. Davidson, her former art mentor. Their reunion at a quiet cafe brought tears to her eyes as the elderly man embraced her with surprising strength. "My dear girl," he exclaimed, "when you disappeared, I feared the worst." Over tea, Savannah shared an abbreviated version of her story. Mr. Davidson listened with growing indignation. "I always knew that husband of yours was trouble," he muttered. "The way he looked at your artwork, not seeing the talent, only the price tag." "You tried to warn me," Savannah acknowledged. "Nonsense," he waved dismissively. "We all must follow our own path. The important thing is you found your way back to yourself." His eyes twinkled. "And to your art, I hope." "Yes," Savannah smiled. "Lorenzo helped me set up a studio. I'm painting again." "Good man, this doctor of yours," Mr. Davidson nodded approvingly. "Brings the light back to your eyes." As they parted, he pressed a small package into her hands, her original application to the Harrington Institute. "I saved it after you disappeared. The deadline has passed for this year, but next year—" He squeezed her fingers. Promise me you'll try again." Savannah hugged him tightly. "I promise." At night, after lingering kisses that grew increasingly passionate, Lorenzo would reluctantly leave for his own home, respecting the boundaries Savannah needed as she continued to heal from her past. "You're sure you don't mind waiting?" she asked one evening as they sat on her balcony, watching the sunset. Her hand rested protectively over her growing belly, now visibly rounded at 4 months. Lorenzo's fingers intertwined with her free hand. "I would wait forever if that's what you needed," he said, sincerity in his dark eyes making her heart flutter. "I've never known anyone like you," Savannah admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if you're real." Lorenzo laughed warmly. "I'm very real," he assured her, bringing her hand to his lips, "and very imperfect." Lorenzo's sister Sophia arrived the following week for a cardiac conference. Despite Savannah's nervousness, the dinner at an intimate Italian restaurant was filled with laughter and stories as Sophia recounted tales from their childhood. "Lorenzo was always so serious," Sophia said, gesturing expressively. "Even at 10, organizing his toy soldiers by rank and medical specialty." Lorenzo groaned good-naturedly. "I wasn't that bad." When Lorenzo excused himself to take a call, Sophia leaned forward. "He's different with you," she said quietly. "Happier, more at peace." "He's been so kind to me," Savannah replied. "It's more than kindness." Sophia studied her with eyes so like her brother's. "I haven't seen him look at anyone. The way he looks at you, not even Elena, his former fiancée," Savannah asked, surprised. Sophia nodded. Lorenzo loved her in his way, but there was always something missing. She sipped her wine thoughtfully. With her, he was always trying to fix something, her restlessness, her ambition. It exhausted him. "And with me?" Savannah asked. Sophia's smile was gentle. "With you, he doesn't seem to feel the need to fix anything. He simply wants to be with you, exactly as you are." The insight struck Savannah deeply. Sebastian had always treated her as a project, while Lorenzo saw her fully and loved what he saw. That night, after Sophia had been dropped at her hotel, Lorenzo walked Savannah to her door. The night was cool and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. "Your sister adores you," Savannah said. "The feeling is mutual," Lorenzo replied, "and she adores you too. Even though I'm complicated, pregnant with another man's child, technically still married, carrying more emotional baggage than most airport carousels." Lorenzo stepped closer, cupping her cheek. "You're not complicated, Savannah. You're extraordinary." Their kiss deepened, beyond those they'd shared before, filled with a hunger that made Savannah's heart race. Lorenzo's arms encircled her waist as his lips moved from her mouth to her jaw, then the sensitive spot below her ear. "Stay," Savannah whispered. "Tonight." "With me?" Lorenzo searched her eyes. "Are you sure?" In answer, Savannah led him inside, closing the door on the world outside. "I've been afraid," she admitted. "Not of you, but of trusting my own feelings again. After Sebastian—" "You don't have to explain," Lorenzo assured her. "But I want to. This isn't about replacing him or rebounding. It's about you, Lorenzo, just you. And it's about you, Savannah, just you." Their lovemaking was nothing like what she had experienced with Sebastian. Where he had been demanding, Lorenzo was tender, attentive, treating her changing form with awe rather than possessiveness. Afterward, lying in Lorenzo's arms, Savannah felt tears slip silently down her cheeks. Tears of relief at finally understanding what it meant to be truly loved by a good man. Chapter 7. The Proposal. The week before the exhibition, Lorenzo seemed unusually distracted. Twice Savannah caught him ending phone calls abruptly when she entered the room, and he'd been making mysterious trips to the city without explanation. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked over dinner, worry creeping into her voice. "Lorenzo," looked up from his barely touched pasta, remorse crossing his features. "I'm sorry. Work has been complicated, and there's something I've been planning." "Planning?" Savannah echoed, a flutter of unease in her stomach. The last time a man in her life had been secretive, it had ended with her on a rain-soaked road. As if reading her thoughts, Lorenzo reached across the table, taking her hand. "Nothing bad, I promise. Just something important." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "Trust me a little longer." "I trust you," she said softly, and realized she meant it completely. "You're being very mysterious," Savannah said days later, laughing as Lorenzo guided her toward his car, her eyes covered with a silk scarf. "Patience," he replied, his voice warm with excitement. "It's a surprise." At 5 months pregnant, Savannah had begun to bloom. Her skin glowed with health. The morning sickness finally subsided. She painted for hours each day, creating a series of vibrant canvases that Lorenzo had privately declared her best work yet. "Sarah mentioned Sebastian's been cancelling meetings with his attorneys," Savannah said during the drive. "She thinks he might be having second thoughts about fighting the divorce." Lorenzo's expression remained neutral, but Savannah noticed the tension in his shoulders. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Part of me hopes he's finally accepting it's over, but another part worries this is another manipulation," Lorenzo finished. "Whatever he's planning, we'll face it together." The car slowed to a stop and Lorenzo squeezed her hand. "We're here." As the blindfold fell away, Savannah blinked in the evening light. Before her stood an elegant gallery in the Arts District, its windows glowing warmly. Above the entrance, a banner read, "New Horizons, the Renaissance of Savannah Rose." "Lorenzo," she breathed. "What is this?" His smile was tender as he tucked a stray curl behind her ear. "Your exhibition, your return to the art world." Inside, Savannah gasped. The main gallery showcased her paintings, 20 canvases arranged with perfect lighting. Her recent work dominated vibrant seascapes, impressionistic studies of her growing belly, and abstract explorations of emotion, charting her journey from darkness into light. But there were older pieces too, paintings she'd completed years ago, before Sebastian. "I thought they were lost," she whispered, approaching a canvas she'd painted at 19. "Sebastian stored all my old work in the attic." "How did you get them?" "Sarah found them when she collected your personal items," Lorenzo explained. "Sebastian apparently never bothered to dispose of them." Tears flowed freely now, Savannah overwhelmed by seeing her artistic journey displayed with such care and respect. "There's someone else you should thank," Lorenzo said, nodding toward the gallery entrance where Mr. Davidson stood watching them. "A dear girl," he said, opening his arms as she rushed to embrace him. "Look at you, radiant as ever and painting better than I could have imagined." Over champagne, sparkling water for Savannah, and elegant hors d'oeuvres, the small gathering of Lorenzo's friends and colleagues admired her work. Art critics exchanged thoughtful observations. Collectors inquired about prices, and throughout it all, Lorenzo remained at her side, a steady presence. As the evening wound down, Lorenzo guided Savannah to a painting at the far end of the gallery. One, covered with a velvet cloth, separated from the others. "One last surprise," he said, his voice betraying nervousness. With a flourish, he removed the cloth to reveal not a painting, but a photograph, professionally framed. It showed Savannah in her studio, sunlight streaming through the windows to illuminate her in a golden glow as she worked. "Lorenzo, it's beautiful, but I don't understand." She turned to find him kneeling before her, a small velvet box in his hand. The gallery had quietly emptied, leaving them alone amid her art, her past, present, and perhaps her future. "Savannah Rose," Lorenzo began, emotion shining in his eyes. When I found you that night in the rain, I had no idea I was also finding my heart. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not a traditional diamond solitaire, but an elegant band of rose gold supporting a stunning oval sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I know the timing isn't conventional," he continued. "Your divorce isn't final. We have a baby on the way that biologically isn't mine. But I've never been more certain of anything than I am of my love for you." Tears blurred Savannah's vision as Lorenzo took her hand. "I want to build a life with you, to support your art, to help raise this child, to grow old surrounded by the family we create together." His eyes held hers. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Lorenzo, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the sapphire catching the light as he rose to take her in his arms. Their kiss was sweet with promise, witnessed only by the paintings that chronicled their journey. "When?" she asked simply as they celebrated with a private dinner on the gallery's rooftop. "Whenever you're ready, after the baby, after the divorce, I'll wait." His expression grew serious. "But I'd like to legally adopt the baby as soon as possible after we're married." The thought of her child having Lorenzo as a father brought fresh tears to Savannah's eyes. "Nothing would make me happier." Chapter 8. The confrontation to Lorenzo and Savannah. Champagne glasses clinked as friends and family gathered at Lorenzo's lakeside estate to celebrate their engagement. The evening was perfect. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and Savannah, radiant in a flowing emerald dress that accentuated her 6-month baby bump, had never looked more beautiful. Lorenzo couldn't take his eyes off her. She moved through the crowd with grace and confidence that had been absent when he first found her on that rain-soaked road. "You've done well, little brother," Sophia said, appearing at his side. She had flown in from Barcelona specifically for the engagement party with her husband and twins. "She did all the hard work herself," Lorenzo replied. "I just gave her a safe place to heal." Sophia squeezed his arm. "Don't sell yourself short. Finding a love like this, it's rare. Treasure it." "I intend to," he promised. Across the terrace, Savannah felt Lorenzo's eyes on her and glanced up, their gazes locking across the crowd. She excused herself and began making her way toward him when a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. Voices were raised, security staff arguing with someone attempting to enter uninvited. "I have every right to be here. That's my wife you're all celebrating with." Sebastian Chamberlain pushed past the guards, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair mussed, and his eyes, Savannah noticed with shock, were bloodshot and rimmed with red, as if he'd been crying. Lorenzo was at her side instantly, his arm protective around her waist. "Chamberlain," he said, voice low and dangerous, "you weren't invited. Leave now." Sebastian ignored him, his gaze fixed on Savannah. "Is it true?" he demanded, holding up a society page clipping featuring their engagement announcement. "You're marrying him while still carrying my child?" A hush fell over the party. Savannah felt dozens of eyes upon her, but it was the naked pain in Sebastian's expression that struck her most forcefully. For the first time, his carefully cultivated facade had cracked completely, revealing something raw beneath. "Sebastian," she said steadily, despite her racing heart, "this isn't the place for this conversation." "When is the place?" he demanded, stepping closer. "When you're already married to him, when my child is calling another man father." There was a wildness to Sebastian that alarmed her, even as it awakened a flicker of pity. This was not the cold, controlled man who had manipulated her for years. This was someone on the edge, unpredictable and dangerous. "Let's talk privately," she suggested. "The study, perhaps?" Lorenzo moved to accompany them, but Savannah shook her head. "I need to do this," she murmured. "But stay close." The study, was a sanctuary of leather and wood, with bookshelves lining the walls and a massive desk overlooking the lake. Sebastian paced the Persian rug while Savannah stood near the door, one hand resting protectively over her belly. "Why are you here, Sebastian?" she asked quietly. He stopped pacing, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I needed to see if it was true. If you're really marrying him." His voice cracked. "Yes," Savannah said simply. "I am." Sebastian's face contorted with pain. "Do you love him?" The question caught Savannah off guard. In their 3 years of marriage, Sebastian had rarely shown interest in her feelings. "Yes," she answered honestly. "I do. And you never loved me?" The question was barely a whisper. Savannah considered her response carefully. "I thought I did once. But what we had wasn't love, Sebastian. It was control, possession, fear. I've changed," he insisted, stepping toward her. "These past months without you, they've been hell. I've been seeing a therapist. I understand now what I did wrong." Savannah had imagined this moment many times. Sebastian, apologizing, claiming transformation. In her darkest days with him, such a scene would have seemed like salvation. Now it merely saddened her. "I'm glad you're getting help," she said gently. "But it doesn't change what happened between us." Sebastian's expression hardened. "He's poisoned you against me, made you forget what we had." "What we had was you throwing me out in a storm while I was pregnant," Savannah reminded him, her voice gaining strength. "What we had was you controlling who I saw, what I wore, whether I could paint." "I made mistakes," Sebastian admitted, his voice pleading. "Terrible mistakes, but that baby—" He gestured toward her rounded belly. "That's our child, Savannah, our future." "No," Savannah said firmly. "This child is my future. And Lorenzo's, if that's what the baby chooses when they're old enough to understand." The door opened and Lorenzo entered, his expression calm, but his eyes alert. "Everything all right?" "We're finished," Savannah said. "Sebastian was just leaving." "Like hell I am," Sebastian snarled, his composure crumbling. "You think I'll just walk away, let you play happy families with my wife and my child?" "Ex-wife," Lorenzo corrected, his tone level but firm. "And a child you rejected." Sebastian's face contorted with rage, but then, unexpectedly, he crumpled, sinking into a leather armchair as if his legs could no longer support him. "I never rejected the baby," he said hollowly. "I rejected the possibility that it wasn't mine." He looked up at Savannah, eyes haunted. "I was jealous, paranoid. I convinced myself you were unfaithful because it was easier than admitting I was losing you." The admission was so unlike Sebastian, so stripped of pretense, that Savannah felt momentarily disoriented. "The night I threw you out," Sebastian continued, barely audible. "After you left, I realized what I'd done. I drove around for hours looking for you in the storm. When I couldn't find you, I filed a missing persons report." His eyes met hers. "By then, you'd already found him." He gestured toward Lorenzo, the movement weary rather than accusatory. "I've spent every day since then regretting what I did, hating myself for hurting you, for losing you." Savannah felt complicated emotions. Pity for this broken man, but also certainty that his remorse couldn't erase years of cruelty. One moment of regret didn't outweigh countless moments of control. "I'm sorry for your pain," she said gently, "but my future is with Lorenzo now." Sebastian looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once in defeat. Rising shakily, his commanding presence diminished, he paused at the door. "The divorce papers," he said quietly. "I've instructed my lawyers to stop the delays. You'll be free by the end of the month." With that, he was gone, leaving a heavy silence. Savannah released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, leaning into Lorenzo's embrace as tension drained from her body. "Are you all right?" Lorenzo asked. Savannah nodded, surprised to find that she truly was. Seeing Sebastian so broken had stirred her compassion but confirmed her decision. What they had shared had never been real love, and what she found with Lorenzo was worth fighting for. The morning after Sebastian's dramatic appearance, Sarah arrived at Lorenzo's estate with a determined expression and a thick folder of legal documents. "I thought we should go over our options," she said, spreading papers across the dining table. "Sebastian's behavior gives us grounds for a restraining order if you want to pursue that." Savannah sank into a chair, exhaustion catching up with her. "Is that necessary?" He seemed more broken than threatening. Sarah's professional demeanor softened. Sometimes the most dangerous moment is when the controlling partner realizes they've truly lost control. She placed a gentle hand on Savannah's arm. "I've seen this before. The tears, the pleading. It's often just another manipulation tactic." "You think he was faking?" Lorenzo asked. "Not necessarily," Sarah clarified. "But emotional displays can be weapons too." Savannah considered this, remembering how Sebastian's anger had transformed mysteriously into tenderness once she'd submitted to his will. "What do you recommend?" she asked finally. Sarah outlined their options with efficiency, but as she was leaving, she paused in the doorway, her professional mask slipping. "When my sister was trying to leave her abusive husband," she said quietly, "I gave her all the right legal advice, but I forgot to tell her the most important thing." She looked directly at Savannah. "You deserve to be happy. Don't let guilt or fear pull you back into the darkness." After Sarah left, Savannah realized why the attorney had fought so fiercely on her behalf. This wasn't just a case to her, but a battle Sarah was fighting for her sister through Savannah. "She's right," Lorenzo said, massaging her tense shoulders. "You deserve every happiness." "We both do," Savannah whispered. "We both do." Chapter 9. The Truth Revealed. A week after their confrontation with Sebastian, Sarah called with news that left Savannah breathless. "It's done," the attorney said, her voice triumphant. "Sebastian signed the final papers this morning. No more delays, no more demands. As soon as the judge signs off, which should be within 30 days, you'll officially be divorced." When Savannah shared the news with Lorenzo that evening, he lifted her in a celebratory embrace that made her laugh with pure joy. For the first time since that rainy night, Savannah felt truly free, ready to begin her new life without the shadow of her past. But Sebastian's apparent capitulation nagged at her. Why, after months of delaying tactics, had he suddenly surrendered? "I need to speak with Sarah," she told Lorenzo the next morning. Sarah Hamilton's law office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building with views of the city's skyline. As Savannah's divorce attorney, she had become not just a legal advisor, but a trusted ally. He said what? Sarah's eyebrows rose as Savannah recounted Sebastian's claims about searching for her the night he'd thrown her out. "Is it possible?" Savannah asked. "Could he have filed a report that somehow never got followed up on?" Sarah's expression was skeptical. "Possible, but unlikely, especially given who Sebastian is. Wealthy, connected." She tapped a manicured nail against her desk. "Let me make some calls." While Sarah stepped out, Lorenzo took Savannah's hand. "What are you thinking?" "I'm not sure," Savannah admitted. "Part of me wants to believe he regrets what he did, that he tried to find me that night. But another part doesn't trust anything he says," Lorenzo finished. "After what he put you through, that's reasonable," Sarah returned, her expression troubled. "I spoke with a detective I know. There's no record of any missing persons report filed by Sebastian Chamberlain in the last 6 months. Savannah felt a curious mixture of disappointment and vindication. So he lied again. Not necessarily, Sarah cautioned. I asked my contact to dig deeper, to check if there were any other reports associated with that night. She hesitated. There was a police report filed, but not for a missing person. Sebastian reported a theft. A theft? Savannah echoed, confused. What was supposedly stolen? Sarah's expression was grave. According to the report, you took valuable jewelry and artwork when you left. He claimed a total of over $100,000 in missing items. The accusation was so unexpected, so wildly false, that Savannah could only stare in disbelief. "That's absurd," she finally managed. "I left with nothing but the clothes on my back." "I know," Sarah assured her. "And the police investigation concluded the same. There was no evidence of theft. No missing items could be verified. The case was closed within days." Lorenzo's expression had darkened with anger. "So while Savannah was unconscious in my guest room fighting hypothermia, Sebastian was trying to have her arrested for theft." "It appears so," Sarah confirmed. "This actually works in our favor for the divorce. It demonstrates malicious intent." But Savannah barely heard the legal implications. Sebastian's apparent remorse, his tearful confession at the engagement party, had been built on lies. He hadn't searched for her out of concern. He had tried to punish her for leaving by having her. "Criminally charged?" "There's more," Sarah said, her tone softening. "When I requested the full police record, I found something else. Another report filed by Sebastian, dated about a week after the first one." Savannah braced herself. "What was it?" "A missing persons report," Sarah said, sliding a document across the desk. "Apparently, when the theft investigation fell apart, he changed tactics." Savannah scanned the report, her heart pounding. Sebastian had described her as emotionally unstable, had suggested she might be a danger to herself or others. He had painted a picture of a troubled woman who had fled during an argument, conveniently omitting that he had divorced her and thrown her out in a storm. "This explains why no one came looking for you," Sarah continued. The detective noted inconsistencies with the earlier theft report. They flagged it as potentially false and did minimal follow-up. The calculated cruelty stole Savannah's breath. Sebastian hadn't been worried about her welfare that night. He had been enraged by her escape from his control and had tried to use the legal system to punish her. "I need some air," Savannah said abruptly, rising from her chair. The walls of Sarah's office suddenly felt too close, the revelations too overwhelming. Lorenzo followed her to a small balcony overlooking the city, giving her space, but remaining close enough to offer support if needed. For several minutes, Savannah simply breathed, her hand on her swollen belly where the baby kicked vigorously, as if sensing her distress. "I believed him," she finally said. "Last night, for a moment, I actually felt sorry for him. Thought maybe he had changed." Lorenzo moved beside her, his shoulder just touching hers. "You saw what you wanted to see," he said gently. "What any decent person would hope for, genuine remorse, the possibility of redemption." "I was a fool," Savannah said bitterly. "No," Lorenzo countered. "You were compassionate, even towards someone who hurt you deeply. That's not foolishness, Savannah. It's strength." As they drove away from Sebastian's mansion later that day, after a final confrontation where Sebastian had admitted to his lies and manipulations, Savannah felt a profound sense of release. The confrontation hadn't unfolded as she'd expected, but it had provided something she needed more than victory: clarity. Sebastian was not the monster she had sometimes painted him as in her darkest moments, nor was he the changed man he had claimed to be. He was simply human, flawed, complex, capable of both cruelty and regret. "Are you all right?" Lorenzo asked as they turned onto the main road. Savannah placed her hand over his on the gearshift. "Yes," she said, surprised to find it was true. "I think I finally am." As they drove home, Savannah felt the baby shift within her, movements growing stronger with each passing week. At 6 months pregnant, her body had changed dramatically, her once slight frame now dominated by the graceful curve of her belly. "She's active today," Lorenzo observed, noticing Savannah's hand pressed against her side. "She's always active when you're around," Savannah replied with a smile. Already a daddy's girl. The words slipped out naturally, and for a moment Savannah worried she'd presumed too much. But Lorenzo's expression, a mixture of wonder and profound love, erased any doubt. "I was thinking," he said as they turned onto the lakeside road, "we should start preparing the nursery soon. The blue room, perhaps. It gets beautiful morning light." "The blue room," Savannah agreed, her throat tight with emotion. "Where you first brought me in from the storm. Full circle," Lorenzo murmured, reaching for her hand. "From rescue to family." Chapter 10. Love Conquers All. Sunrise painted the horizon in breathtaking shades of gold and rose, the ocean reflecting the sky's glory in shimmering waves. On the private stretch of beach behind Lorenzo's seaside cottage, white chairs had been arranged in intimate rows, a simple floral arch marking the spot where two lives would officially become one. Savannah stood at the window of the bedroom, watching the first guests arrive. Her hand drifted to the now familiar weight of her daughter, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her. Aria Rose Castillo, born just 8 weeks ago after a surprisingly swift labor that had caught them all by surprise. Savannah smiled at the memory. She'd been putting final touches on a painting in her studio when her water broke 3 weeks before her due date. Lorenzo had been in surgery, unreachable. It was Mrs. Winters who had driven her to the hospital, holding her hand and coaching her through increasingly intense contractions. By the time Lorenzo arrived, still in surgical scrubs, Savannah was already in the delivery room. She would never forget the look on his face when he burst through the door, panic giving way to pure devotion as he took his position by her side, supporting her through each push until Aria entered the world with a lusty cry. "You've never looked more beautiful," he had whispered as the nurses placed the tiny, dark-haired bundle on Savannah's chest. And despite the exhaustion, despite the sweat and tears, Savannah had never felt more powerful or more complete. "You look absolutely radiant," Sarah said, entering the room with baby Aria cradled in her arms. The attorney had become a close friend, standing by Savannah through the divorce proceedings and later agreeing to be her bridesmaid. "It's the happiness," Savannah replied, turning to accept her daughter. At 2 months old, Aria was a peaceful baby with Lorenzo's dark eyes and Savannah's full lips, a perfect blend that somehow seemed fitting despite the absence of biological connection. The ceremony was everything Savannah had dreamed of: intimate, meaningful, filled with love rather than spectacle. Mr. Davidson walked her down the aisle, his eyes misty with pride as he placed her hand in Lorenzo's. Sophia stood as Lorenzo's best woman, beaming as they exchanged vows written from the heart. "Savannah," Lorenzo began, "before you, I thought I understood what love was. I had known accomplishment, satisfaction, even happiness. But I had never known the quiet joy of finding my perfect complement, the person who makes me better simply by being herself." Tears slipped down Savannah's cheeks as his words washed over her, healing the last lingering wounds of her past. "Lorenzo," she responded, "you found me on my darkest night and showed me what it means to be truly seen and valued. You never tried to fix me or change me. You simply created space for me to heal, to grow, to rediscover myself." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, applause erupted from their gathered loved ones. Aria, nestled in Sophia's arms, gurgled happily, as if adding her own blessing to the union. Later, Lorenzo presented Savannah with a small, wrapped package. Inside was a velvet box containing an antique brass key. "What's this?" Savannah asked, turning it over in her palm. "The key to a studio." "In Paris," he said. "I've arranged a 6-month sabbatical from the hospital. Starting next month, we'll be living in an apartment near the Seine, where you can paint and immerse yourself in the art world while I do guest lectures at the medical school." Tears filled her eyes again. Paris? But your practice, the hospital, can... Wait, Lorenzo finished. This is our beginning, Savannah. I want it to be extraordinary. Do you think he'll come? Savannah asked later that night as they lay tangled in the sheets of their marriage bed, the sounds of celebration continuing outside. Lorenzo didn't need to ask who she meant. Sebastian. No. I think he finally understands that chapter is closed. I sent him an invitation, she admitted, not because I wanted him here, but because I wanted him to know I'm truly happy now, that I've found what love really is. Lorenzo's expression softened as he brushed a curl from her face. Was that closure for him or for you? Both, maybe. Savannah settled against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. I needed him to see that he didn't break me, that I'm stronger now than I ever was. You always were strong, Lorenzo murmured, kissing her forehead. Even that first night, unconscious and half-frozen, there was something in you that refused to surrender. A soft cry from the baby monitor interrupted their moment. Arya was awake, demanding attention with increasing urgency. I'll go, Lorenzo said, sliding from the bed. When he returned with Arya cradled against his chest, the baby's cries subsiding to contented coos, the sight stole Savannah's breath. She was just lonely, Lorenzo explained, settling carefully beside her, wanted to be part of the celebration. Savannah sat up, reaching for her daughter. As she took the baby in her arms, a sudden memory flashed. The night of the storm, the cold rain on her face, the utter desolation of having nowhere to go. How different her world was now, enveloped in warmth and love. What are you thinking? Lorenzo asked, noticing the tears that had welled in her eyes. That sometimes life's worst storms bring us exactly where we're meant to be, she replied, looking up at him with a smile that contained all the love in her heart. That sometimes we have to get completely lost before we can find our way home. Lorenzo reached out, his hand cradling her face with infinite tenderness. Welcome home, Mrs. Castillo, he whispered, his eyes shining with the promise of all their tomorrows. As the moon rose over the ocean, casting silver light through the windows, the three of them, mother, father, child, created their own private celebration. A family formed not from obligation or biology, but from the most powerful force of all, a love that had weathered the darkest night and emerged triumphant into the dawn of a beautiful new day.